right, folks, in today's episode, we have our special guest, Nick Obin, and we're going to talk today about dice advice for Crusaders that will be done, and Rob's going to give us a rundown on his trip to Stonemaier Design Day 2022. Stick around.
You're listening to the Beans and Dice podcast, a podcast about how we game.
Hey, folks, this week is Your Turn Con 2022 in Zephyrhills, Florida at the Your Turn Board Game Cafe. Make sure that you are getting your tickets now. Single-day tickets are now on sale. This is the last week before we get going. Big flea market. I'll be there. Rob and I will also be there playing games the whole weekend. So join the Beans and Dice crew at Your Turn Convention 2022. See you then. All right, folks, welcome to the Bean playing segment of the show. We've been playing some games, and we're going to start off with Nick Obin, our guest today. Talk about what you've been playing.
Hey, all right. So it has been on my shelf for a long time.
Is Bean on your shelf?
It's been on my shelf for a long time. Big fan of the West Kingdom trilogy, starting with Architects, Viscounts, and finally got a play-in of Paladins of the West Kingdom. Ooh, it's good. So they're all worker placement or action selection and worker-based games, all of them in the trilogy. But Paladins, I think, is a worker placement dream. Everything about it was very, very nice. Every round, so the game is played in 7 rounds, and every round, the workers that you get to play are variable depending on the paladin you choose to help you that round, as well as a set of cards that you draft from in the center of the table that then become competitive because there's N+1 cards to pick from. So in a 4-player game, there's 5 cards to pick from. If you pick last that turn, that round, then you're stuck with whatever was left of the final 2. And so the workers, unlike a lot of worker placement games, and I think this is actually the really key nuance that then permeates throughout everything in the game, the workers are one of 6 different types. I think it was 6, and they're color-coded. So, like, some of the workers might be the clergy, or some workers are just regular laborers. Some of them are traders, and so on and so forth, which you have to use the right colored worker, the right type of worker in various spots within the worker placement mechanic. So worker placement, of course, there's all these spots available. You've got some that are private to you, and you have some that then are public out on the shared board. And those shared spaces actually develop over the course of the game, with new ones coming out each round, starting in the 3rd round. And what those spots are changes every time you play. It's cards that are drawn randomly, so you don't know what's coming. But it just, the idea of 6, which is a big number, different kinds of workers that then have to be used in different ways on the spots, and then every round the types of workers you get are variable. It adds this layer of puzzly planning goodness to everything that then you know about worker placement games. So think about, viticulture or Stone Age or any of those where you're looking down at the board and you're like, all right, I only have 6 workers, 8 workers, whatever it is. What am I going to do this turn? In viticulture, they break it into seasons, which is cool. Stone Age, you've got the dice mitigation that you've got to deal with, because the more workers you bring, the better chances you are of making the best bang for buck of that spot. And then here in Paladins, they really kind of add on to all of that by making the type of worker matter and which workers you're going to get changing every round. It's really great. I also like the 7-round kind of known ahead of time. It is a timer. As the rounds go, you get access to more spots. You're building your engine the whole time, so it does that beautifully as well. I did mention the spots in front of you. What you do is you're powering your own kind of tableau or engine. As you're using the spots in your private board, you're making your private board better, which is really, really neat. And then developing points kind of throughout it, that board as well as the public board. So I loved it. I thought it was great. Playtime was fine for a game of its size and general complexity. It is not a huge leap over other worker placement games. I think it just does everything about worker placement really, really well.
I played all three of these, and so I'm curious to know what is your ranking now that you've played all three of the three in the series. Which one do you like the most?
That's a great question. So probably comes as no surprise. Maybe it's just because I just played it and I just talked about it. If time is not an issue, I will say, if time and complexity are no issue, Paladins wins. Architects is quicker to set up, quicker to play, and quicker to teach. And still is a great worker placement game. And the worker placement nuance in that game, which I like a lot, is you start with 20 workers, and throughout the course of the game, you actually permanently allocate some of those workers to the key score, one of the key scoring elements in the game. So you're slowly losing your supply of workers, but otherwise you have this giant pool of workers, and you can do so much. So that's really neat. And every time I play that game, I enjoy it. Then on the flip side, Viscounts feels very different with the rondelle movement cycle, which I do like a lot. If time and complexity are not an issue, I think I'm going to go in just reverse order of me playing them: Paladins, Viscounts, and then Architects. But if I'm introducing someone to the trilogy, I start with Architects. It is the first of the games that came out. It is the simplest, clearest kind of worker placement style, and it's not such a big jump up from Stone Age or something like that.
Yes, I have not played any of them. So
me neither.
I want to. Yeah. So maybe your turn con in a week and a half or a week from when this podcast release. I want to try them because Paladins is fairly heavy weighted. 3.7 on BGG. That's a pretty heavy game. 90 minutes to 2 hours. So that sounds like it's a fairly complex game. I want to play though. I love the way it sounds. I love worker placement. That's my number one thing. So I definitely want to try these. They look good. They're all highly rated. They've been on my list. I just don't own them to play. So yeah, your turn kind of sounds like a place.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I will say the complexity of Paladins, having only played it once, is like so many of these kind of games, not in the complexity of your particular turn. On your turn, you pick workers from your supply and you activate a spot. Done. Right? It is entirely the nuanced timing of managing the 7 rounds of the game, which there's 7 rounds of the game, and then versus what you don't know. You don't know the public spaces that are coming out. You don't know some of the extra scoring conditions that get revealed in early rounds, and how are you going? And you don't know the types of workers you're going to have access to, although you know some of them because you get to plan your Paladins, which is great. Oh, I didn't even talk. My favorite part of the beginning of every round is you draw 3 Paladins from your deck of 12, and we all have the same 12, but they're shuffled, so they come in different order. You draw 3, you choose 1 to help you this round, 1 to put on top of your deck, so he'll be one of the 3 you draw next round, and 1 to bury in the bottom of the deck, so you might not see him again at all, or you might see him in several rounds from now. But doing that little bit of planning there, where you get to have control over next round at least a little bit, where you know one of the 3 Paladins, is so fun. It's like gleeful almost when you're like, oh, I'm going to do something cool this round, and next round I already kind of have it worked out, so I'm going to play this round knowing what's coming. But then, wait, and I'm not done. It's great. That Paladin that you planned for, right? You put him on the top of your deck. He or she is only one of 3 you draw next round. So then you draw the 3 in that next round, and of course you see the one you expect to be there that you planned for. But there's another one that would be really good too, that you didn't know was gonna be there. And now it's like, do I do my plan, stick to the plan, or do I pivot? And I could pivot. I could do this. I could do that. It's really neat, giving you control in a game that feels like so much is going on and might be out of your control. Fun.
Very cool. Yeah, you moved up my list of games I want to try.
Yeah, all three of them are so good, and for different reasons. I don't know if I can pick a favorite. If I want heavy, crunchy, a big, nice, heavy game, I'm liking Paladins. I found Viscounts. There we go. Jumped out of my head. Viscounts to be so different than the other two that I liked it quite a bit. I thought it was fun. It was just kind of more fun. And then Architects, there you go, upside down. There you go. Architects with the starting with all of your workers just as completely gives you a different thought process, a different way to go about it. I mean, most worker placement games, you're having to take actions to get additional workers. And this one, you get them all up front. And like you mentioned, you place some permanently. You have some that get sent to jail, which can limit how many you have available at any particular time until you send somebody to go round them up. And so each one of these games really good on their own. And I enjoy playing all three of them.
Now, I know we're going a little long with the Bean playing, but these games, the West Kingdom games trilogy, they're from the same people that did the Raiders games, the Raiders trilogy. Correct?
Yes,
and they're similar, right? Or isn't it like they're just kind of like different versions of the same game in the trilogy? So if you played all the one, you kind of familiar with the next series? Are they different? I've only played Raiders in the North Sea and one of the other Raiders games or North Sea games, but
they're definitely different iconography. You can't really just pick one up from the other series and know what you're doing because you'll need to learn all the new iconography. I mean, they are all really good worker placement games. They are all kind of similar complexities. They do different things in different ways, but they are different enough that you can't just grab one from the other series and automatically know what you're doing.
Gotcha. Cool. Very cool. I like it.
Yeah, because it feels like they try to theme these up. You got like the North Sea things, right? The Raiders of the North Seas, the was it Explorers of the North Sea? I can't remember.
I think
series
Explorers one,
of the North Sea stuff. Then there was the Raiders of Scythia and the
Raiders of Scythia.
Was very much like Raiders of the North Sea, just to feel like a different theme. But I can't say they all have a thread that runs through them, other than like the artwork.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
and that is one thing. The West Kingdom series does a decent job of keeping you in that kind of Crusader Renaissance period, right? So in Architects, the big thing is you're building the great cathedral. In Viscounts, you've got kind of your leader dude marching around. I think it's similar then to Paladins, where Paladins, you are very much going on like a crusade thematically, building out your like forward outpost, but then also going and trying to either convert or conquer kind of the heathens out there in the wild, enlisting the Paladins, the great religious warriors, to your cause, which can be a little tricky if you're not into that, but it does well. Yeah.
All right, we talked Paladins, and can't have a D&D party without some wizards. So, Wayne, what have you been playing?
I'm going like completely opposite of Nick. Nick was on the 3.7 weight scale. The game I'm going to talk about is weighted 1.4. It's called Wizard Kittens. It was a Kickstarter game that my wife kickstarted or made me kickstart to play with our son. It's 2020 release Kickstarter game. It's rated 6.3. I might rate it a little higher than that because we know that BGG tends to rate towards the more gamer games. This is definitely a kids game. It's age 7+, 15 to 30 minute game, and it's really it's a card game where it's a semi-cooperative card game where you're doing set collection. The theme is where it wins with the kid. You're gonna play a kitten, right? And they're cute little like precious drawings of kittens. Everyone plays a kitten in the wizard's tower, and the wizard's away, and you've knocked over the big spell book that has released a bunch of curses into the tower. And you have to quickly sort of capture those curses and force them back into the spell book before the wizard comes home and catches you. So you're running around, you're set collecting. Sort of each curse has different iconography on it, and you have cards in your hand that you're playing. And you have chapters. There's chapters 1, 2, and 3, kind of the wizard's spell book, and you're trying to build the set collection to capture the curse. And as you do, you collect the curse. You score those points as it was. But if you had to play additional cards into your chapter to do so, you'll take a negative for those additional cards that didn't match the curse. So if you have the 3 or 4 icons that match the curse, you be defeated. But if you had some extras, you collect the extra cards, and that's a negative. and then you play through 3 chapters, and either it's kind of like a pandemic deck where somewhere in that deck is kind of a chaos cat that's going to screw things up, and then towards the end of the deck is going to be the wizard, and he's going to be in like the last 10 cards. So you're trying to race through that deck, defeat all the curses before the wizard comes home. And if you do that, then whoever, as a cooperative, whoever completed the most curses with the least negatives, they kind of are the winner. If the wizard comes home, then it's whatever cat caused the least amount of chaos and the least amount of craziness going on. So it's a very simple card game to teach young kids, 7+, sort of set collection and decision making on which chapter to play cards. But each cat has the same 4 spells, and every turn you can move your little icon to a different spell that you're casting. And that spell lets you either move cards around within the chapters or draw additional cards or steal a card from another player. So it kind of gives you some intro to kind of like that kind of card play mentality. Mostly it's the artwork is really cute, and it's a fun little game. And it's 15 to 30 minutes. So it's a fun game. If you have young children and it's out there, it's definitely kind of a buy if you can find it, just because it's cute and it's a good way to teach games. If you're a gamer, you're a hardcore gamer, like most of us, it's probably not the game for you. But if you have young children, it's a cool game to play. We enjoyed it. Like I said, 15, 30 minutes per game. It goes pretty quick, light. It probably best at 3 plays. You can play 2 to 4, and there's some expansion stuff that lets you, add additional spells or add additional curses. And there are some ways to kind of ramp up the complexity of it. We've played the base game a couple times, and it's been just a lot of fun. So. There's Wizard Kittens.
Cool. So I'm checking out the prices on the BGG for Wizard Kittens, and I see that there's a retail version and a deluxe version. Which way did you go?
So I have the deluxe version because of Kickstarter, and it was
what makes
cool.
it deluxe?
Deluxe, I think there are additional kittens. So like in the base game, I think there's 5 or 6 kittens to choose from. In the deluxe, there's probably 10 or 12 to choose from. The deluxe comes with sort of like foil cards and like just pretty artwork. So I honestly, the retail's fine if you have young kids and you want a quick card game to play. If there's not that much of a difference, you can pick up the deluxe version. The deluxe version has some additional components. I think the deluxe version has the expansion cards, which gives you like curses and monsters to deal with. But fun little game. Again, probably not the best game if you don't have young kids. If you have kids that are 8 or 6, 7, 8, it's a cool game to buy because it's fun to play with.
Well, I'm going to get into an older game. I guess it's a Spiel game. It is an older game. It's Hanabi. It's a 2010 title by Antoine Bauza, and it's a co-op game. It's a cooperative game where anywhere between 2 and I believe it's 4 players, 2 to 5 players, are working together to create a fireworks display show. That's the theme. And the way you're doing it is by playing a cooperative or a group game of almost like solitaire, where you're trying to set up a row of a different suit, starting at 1, working your way to 5. Right, so 1 to 5 of 5 different suits. There are 5 different suits in the game. You can do the complex and make it 6, but it's 5 suits. And you're going to try to lay these cards out or splay them out in 1 through 5 in order. The twist on this game is that you can't see your hand. You don't know what you have in your hand. So you need to rely on your cooperative team to figure out what's in your hand. On your turn, your options are to either play a card out front to try to add it to one of the displays of card, or discard a card, or give a clue. When you give a clue, you look at another player, and you can either choose a color or a number, and then you point to all the cards in the hand of that player that have that color or that number that you chose. So if Rob had cards in his hand, 4 cards in his hand, I would get to point to all of the green. I'd say, Rob, here are all your green cards. And all he sees is the back of the cards. So he has to figure out how to organize his hand to remember these are the cards that I have that are green. And then maybe on this next clue, Nick's going to tell him, Rob, these are your 1s. And he points to maybe 2 1s. One of those happens to be a green. So now Rob knows this green is a 1. Right, so now I can play this 1 down on the table and begin that run of greens from 1 to 5. We're going to give clues until we run out of clue tokens. We can discard cards to gain clue tokens back. And if anyone ever plays a card that is not able to be added into a run or a splay for that color suit, and they discard it, it's a fail. That card goes to, or they play it, that card goes to the discard, and then we lose a fuse token. You lose 3 fuse tokens, you lose the game as a team. The goal is to get all 5 runs played, 1 through 5. You'll score points equal to the highest number of each color run that you created. So the maximum number of points is 25 as a team. And then you try again. Try to beat your score from last time. The reason I brought out Hanabi and the reason I'm talking about it today and not talking about this game is I've been trying to work with Wifey on co-op games, right? Just games for her and I to play cooperative. We tried Fox and the Forest Duet. And I think I talked about that at the call-in show last week, and it just did not hit. It did not hit. It just booed. So we then played The Mind. And I was like, okay, she really liked The Mind. We played like multiple sets of The Mind. And then I thought, you know what? The Mind is all about discarding in order. It reminded me of Hanabi. I remembered it was co-op. Nick Oben was having his Wesley Chapel game day on my birthday. So I took Hanabi with me to teach to Wifey, and I think Rob and Mike played. So Mikey, myself, and Rob and my wife, all 4 of us played a game of Hanabi, and it really hit for her. She's like, I want to play more of Hanabi. So my recommendation on a 2010 Spiel winner by Antoine Bauza is Hanabi.
That's a fun game. I got to tell you, though, my hands hurt after playing that game for about 5 or 10 minutes because the whole time you're holding your cards out in front of you for everybody else to see, and you got to hold them up the whole time. And then once they mark a couple of cards for you, usually I'll slide those kind of down to the side, and then I'm holding those kind of weird now because I've got my 4s over here on this side, my 1s over there on that side, my blue cards sticking up in the middle, and so I'm afraid to set them down because then I'm never going to remember what they were again if I pick them back up. So I think somebody took a bathroom break for about 5 minutes in that game, and my thumbs were cramping up.
Gotta use like the little card holders. And just
I need something. Yeah.
I've played that game it has been years since I played that game, and I can't remember. It was a lot of fun, and it's like hard to find people that were willing to play that now, right? But it's a fun game. To me, it's almost like, is this game kind of like a precursor to The Crew?
Yeah, I was actually going to say what's really great about this with the communication aspect. It is the opposite then of The Crew, though. In The Crew, you know your hand, and it's entirely about communicating your own hand and trying to figure out how do we as a team do this. Whereas here, I love that you know everyone but your hand, and you're looking around the table, and you can see 3 other hands except your own, right? And so, yes, I was immediately kind of drawing comparisons. Me and the boys, of course, have been playing The Crew all year, and I can't believe we haven't actually played Hanabi. I just pulled mine off the shelf, and we'll play that tomorrow, I think. I will say...
Game of day.
I will say my last play of Hanabi, I can remember it, was with other family members I had, and it turned a little heated because we were just not on the same page of why would you tell me these are 3s if you didn't want me to play them or whatever it was, right?
I agree with your family member.
Yeah.
I'm with them. Don't give me information on a card unless you want me to play it next.
Right. And that element reminds me a lot of The Crew because we have a lot of plays of that this year. And sometimes that'll be the thing is like, I'm telling you I have this card because I don't want you to play something or whatever or whatever. It is always safer normally to be straightforward and say, here is my yellow because I want you to play yellow, or I'm telling you that's a 3 because I want you to play a 3. But
you are right though, because what I didn't describe in the explanation of the game was there's a variance in number of numbers in each suit. So that I believe there are 3 or 4 1s per suit, and I think there's 2 of the 2s, the 3s, and the 4s, but there's only 1 5 of each suit. And if you happen to try to play that 5 at the wrong time, or you discard that 5 to try to get a clue token back, you will never be able to get a perfect score of 25 because you will never be able to play that 5. So, yes, you're right.
I think it's really, and like Nick, you hit the nail on the head. That whole, I know everyone else's cards but mine, whereas The Crew is, I know mine but not everyone else's. That's an interesting kind of like you play those 2 games back to back and see how the groups interact with each other. And that's where I think these games shine, is how the groups gel or don't gel.
Right.
That can make the games amazing. Yeah. I haven't played this game in years, and I love it.
And I thought about The Crew for game day. I really did. For next co-op game with Wifey, right? Because I'm running Wifey through a bunch of co-op games. to try to figure out which ones work for us as a couple. The reason I didn't go the crew is that 2-player aspect. I think Hanabi will do 2-player way better than the crew will.
Yeah. Yep. The crew's better with 3 or 4.
Yeah, for sure.
And in the crew, you're winning tricks as a team to try to move forward. Now, 12 chip trick is another trick-taking game that Rob's going to talk about.
Yeah,
you've been playing.
Did the transition for me. I was going to say, speaking of numbers and colors, as you were in Hanabi.
I just wasn't sure where you were going to go with tricks, so I wanted to jump in before you start talking about tricks.
Colors and numbers. That's where I was going to go. Colors and numbers. So much like Hanabi, this is a game that was taught to us just a couple nights ago by Mike Lorenzo, who's down from Seattle, Washington. And he introduced Carlos and I to a game that is exactly 3 players. So that's going to be the trick of this game, is that it's not for 2, not for 4, not to solo. It's only 3. So a 3 exclusive game. And this is pretty much almost a print and play. I think they do sell a retail version, according to what I see here on Board Game Geek. But
we don't know. We can't find a designer. We can't find a publisher. We can't find anything other than like a picture.
Yeah, it says designed by Root. I don't know what that is, ROOT. So maybe that's just some fill-in they have. But in any case, this is just a very simple game. It's 12 discs, 12 chips, I guess they call them. It's 12 chip trick is the name of the game. And it's a trick-taking disc-based or chip-based game. And so what you've got is there are 12 chips, and they are numbered 1 to 12. It's very important to know, though, that the number 1, 2, and 3 and the 10, 11, 12 are black on black chips, and the middle numbers, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, are all on red, or in our case that we printed out was pink chips. And this is in 12 chip trick. You have a lead player who will play one of their discs. Well, I should say before you start, you put all the discs face down. They're only numbered on one side, so you put them number side down. You mix them around on the table, and each player will draw 2 of the pink or red chips, and then they will also draw 2 of the black chips. So you'll have 2 of each color in your hand. And you take those face down, and then you'll have one player who will be the lead. We just randomly kind of would choose someone to lead each time. And when you lead, you can play any of the discs or any of the chips that you like. And when you play it, you're going to flip it face up and push it to the middle of the table. And so this is a optional, I forget how they describe it here on the website. It's an optional or may follow mechanic. They call it may follow. So you really can play any chip that you like. But once we've all 3 in turn order, clockwise, have played a chip out face up into the middle of the table, then whoever played the highest chip will take their choice of the 3 chips. So they can look at all 3 of them and decide which one they want, with a limitation. If there are any pink or red, I'll just call them red from now on, red chips in the middle of the table, they are required to take a red chip. If there's more than one, then they can choose between all of the reds which one they want to take. But if there are no reds, if they're all black, then they can choose any of the black ones. But if there's 1 or 2, then they will take one of those. And then clockwise, going back around the table from whoever won the trick, the next person will choose one of the 2 chips, and then the third person will take whatever's left over. The person who won the trick will take the chip face up and will have that as a certain number of points. The number that's printed on the chip will be how many points they are banking that round. The other 2 people will take the chips back, and they will put them face down, and they will then go back into their pool of chips that they can use to bid on the next trick. And so a round ends once one person has taken their 4th chip face up. And at that point, everybody will keep whatever chips they have in front of them. It'll always end with each person having 4, and then you will total up your scores. With the scoring, you are trying to get exactly 20 points, because if you go over 20 points, your score is halved. And so there's a whole numbers game here where you're trying to take the chips that add you up as close to 20 as possible without going over, or you can shoot the moon, as we found out pretty quick. The very first game we played, I got stuck with, I think it was like the 10 and the 11, not kind of realizing what I was doing or how I was playing, but then it kind of clicked for me pretty quick that, wow, if my score is going to get halved, I might as well try to take as much as I can, because I know at that point, with just 2 chips, I was already at, what was I, at 20 or 20, yeah, I think I was at 20, maybe the 10 and the 9 is what I had actually. I think I was at 20. But or 19 or 20. In any case, at that point, you might as well
that's
try to
only
shoot
2 chips. Your next 2 chips are at minimum 1 and 2.
Right.
It's going to pitch you over 21. You know you're going half points anyway.
So the cool thing is, again, you're trying to get to 20 without going over, but the maximum score in a round is 21, because if you shoot the moon, if you can happen to grab the 9, 10, 11, and 12, that adds up to 42 points.
Jackie Robinson.
Have that. Yeah, there you go. It takes you to 21. So it's this really interesting game. And again, you're only seeing the face-up chips that people have banked, and you only bank that chip when you win a trick. And then everybody else takes them back face down. So it quickly becomes a game of that chips that are banked face up are all out there for people to see. And as soon as you see somebody take, either by choice or by accident, take a fairly high chip, you kind of play this game where between you and the other person, the two kind of opponents to the person who seems to be doing well and taking the points, you're trying to make that decision. Okay, at this point, do we just feed them enough to get them right to like 22 or 21 so that score gets halved, and all the halves round down, by the way. So if you get to an odd number, it's half rounded down. And you're trying to feed each other, but at the same time, you're trying to make your hand work out to be exactly 20, and you're trying to kind of work it with and against the other people to try to mess over the person who looks like they're doing well. But you do this 3 times. You do it once until somebody has 4 face up, and then at that point, again, anybody who has any face down in front of them, still everybody will flip them up, so everybody will have the 4 chips. You'll do a scoring. Everybody flips them face down. You mix them up. You do it again. You rotate first player, the lead, so that each of you will lead once for each of the 3 rounds. And then after 3 rounds, you total up the scores, and whoever had the best score, highest score, wins. So really, if you like pocket-sized games, you can print these as big or small if you want, or if you can find a retail version to buy. They make them as I know Carlos used crokinole chips. I don't know. You can't see it at home.
Buttons, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, buttons. And just he used his laser printer to kind of etch the numbers into them, so they turned out really nice. But you could make these as big as small as you want. We just threw them in a little baggie. We made 3 sets of them, 1 for me, 1 for Carlos, and 1 for Mike. And I literally can put it in my pocket. And with the rules being so simple, he printed out a copy of the rules for me. But I was like, keep those rules. This game's 2 minutes to teach, and I've actually taught all 3 of my kids today how to play it. And so we were messing around this afternoon and playing it. But a lot of fun. Real simple. You can take it pretty much anywhere. We were talking, we could play this at the beach. We could play this in the swimming pool. We could play this pretty much anywhere. So, yep.
I think the biggest selling point for this 12-chip trick is its simplicity in components. The fact that it's 12 chips or crokinole buttons, and they're of 2 different colors, and that's it. That's all you need to play this game. I can see myself playing this anywhere. And the other thing that's a winner for this game is there are very few 3-player trick-taking games that I can think of, and this is one that does it well. I know that my wife destroyed Rob and I.
Oh, yeah.
Destroyed.
There's a theme there about your wife destroying you in game.
Well, me. But the fact that Rob was there, it was like Rob and I were fighting to keep each other from getting points.
Yep.
And my wife was just quietly I'm just going to win.
She shot the moon
trick.
One of the rounds. Yeah, she got the 9, 10, 11,
She got the
12.
full 21 points. She did.
Yeah, while we were trying to mess with each other. And my son Arby did that today. He's second hand we played, he shot the moon, got 21. I was like, I wasn't even paying any attention to what he was doing, but yep, he did it. So yeah, a lot of fun. I said the trick to it, no pun intended, trick to it is the 3-player count. I mean, if I would say this is a definite try and buy, either try and make, I guess I would say again, I don't know if you can really buy a retail
I will have
version or not.
copies available at Your Turn Con. So look me up at Your Turn Con Flea Market. I'm gonna get some chips out, so just some printed chips.
To get like a
for
little
y'all.
side demo table to someone
Show it
We'll
off.
be playing.
Show it off.
Y'all
We will
play it
be
on the
playing.
side. Yeah, while we're in line, you can play
We'll
it.
find a way to make it a drinking game.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, if you have ever really have 3 people in the household or that play games any kind of semi-regularly, this is a great one. And it takes 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes at the most to play through 3 rounds and score it up real quick. So
That's what we've been playing, so stick around for the next segment where we get into Dice Advice about a game that's really been hitting the table a lot for me, my family, as well as on the BGA for myself, Wayne, and Rob. Stick around. Thanks for sticking around for the Dice Advice segment where we're going to talk to you today about Crusaders, Thy Will Be Done, designed by Seth Gaffey and published by Tasty Minstrel Games, and also now Renegade Games. In Crusaders, you move your knights, erect buildings, and go crusading to spread the influence of your order. When the orders get too strong, King Philip will become nervous and disband all Templar orders, ending the game. This game, for me, has hit hard lately. It's a recent learn for me. It was a 2022 learn at a Your Turn event. I was immediately in love, found myself a copy, not the super deluxe version that everybody has from Kickstarters. I found the retail copy. But even the retail copy has all wooden buildings, like actual wooden buildings instead of plastic buildings. It still looks amazing. It's a rondelle-style game where you're going to have a rondelle of wedges with different actions on the rondelle that you can take to take your knights, either Templar knights, Hospitaller knights, all these different order of knights in like the 1300s across the European and Mediterranean to spread the influence of the Christianity and of churches across the Mediterranean in order to build churches and banks and farms and castles. And whoever at the end of the game has the most influence for their order of knights is going to win the game. Who here has played it?
We all have, I guess.
Everybody.
Yeah, I think we all have. Yeah.
It was funny is I watched you playing it at that Your Turn event, and I was like, "Oh, this game looks cool." And then, it's a TMG game. Crap! Guess I'm not getting that game ever.
Yeah.
And so it was nice to see though that now Renegade is going to put out their version, so it's good. Yeah.
I actually picked up my copy of it when TMG announced that they were basically doing the big sale or we're shutting our doors or whatever. They actually had a nice little sale on their website. I picked up Crusaders at that point because it had been, for me, a long time high on the list of games I liked but didn't own. And so I went ahead and grabbed it, mostly because they were going up. I didn't know they were going to be picked up.
Yeah, we were worried they were going to be gone.
Yep.
So I was glad I already had my copy at that point.
So I mean, as far as when we get into the game and start talking about, I've not played a physical copy yet because I don't own a copy, but we've played a number of games on BGA and definitely took one or two tries to really start understanding like, oh, that's what it's got to do, right? So you have this rondelle of actions and it starts out with all basic action. Each wedge has one action. And you can upgrade that action to have a second action that you can choose between. And you have workers or cubes that you're placing around that circle. It took me a couple of times to really understand sort of the speed in which you upgrade that tile. Like I think the first time I literally spent like the first 6 turns just upgrading all 6 or 8 of the tiles, whatever it is. And then I realized, no, you don't necessarily want to do that. You want to strategically upgrade a few of them. So I think the first Dice Advice is if it's your first time playing. And I think you guys, the three of you, will probably talk more in-depth strategy than I will because I've only played 3 or 4 times on BGA only. But what I think I've learned is you don't have to upgrade every wedge. You want to pick a strategy. And what I think I've learned is the decisions you make early in this game really will impact you late in the game. So if I want to be a Crusader and I want to do a ton of crusading actions, then you really want to be careful which wedges you update because you want to update those wedges that give you the additional actions to get more knights or more movement or more crusade actions. If you're looking to do influence and church building, so you can do certain things where there's different building types. There's banks, there's churches, there's castles, and as you build those buildings, you get additional benefits. And some of those benefits will synergize
that engine building aspect.
Engine building, right? Some of the benefits of the buildings will synergize well with, if you want to crusade or if you want to do a lot of influence actions or a lot of whatever. So you have to eventually take every kind of action, but you can you don't want to try to be really good at every action. You want to try to build a few that you're really good at and focus on that as a strategy and as your engine, as opposed to building them all. At least that's what I've seen the first 3-4 games. I think one of the first game, like maybe the second game, Rob, Carlos, and I played, I took like 15 or 16 influence actions. And that's like the most that you guys had ever seen. But I did pretty well because I scored a lot of points because I just kept working my rondelle to get all my cubes on the influence and then taking massive influence turns where I get like 10 like every time. And so I think that's what you want to do is my real big dice advice is, you want to play it a few times because you want to try different strategies, but you want to figure out what strategy you're trying to build for in the late game. You have to make decisions early on as to where you want to get to, and you can't do it all. So you're either crusading and building things that help your crusading, or you're building influence, or you're building muster, and you really want to try to plan out early on what you want to do late game. And I think the first game I played, I did horrible because I spent the first 6 or 7 turns just upgrading my rondelle. And where I lost out is especially early in the game, you're in sort of Western Europe and you're working your way east towards the Middle East, obviously, right? So the build actions and building and crusading and fighting earlier in the West is cheaper. So you want to get some of those actions done early because taking
the majority of the building discounts are all in that west side of Europe. Side.
So yeah, you want to build early what you want to build, and crusade too, because the units further west are easier to defeat than the units further east. So the game will ramp. So if you spend too much time in the early game building your rondelle, you're going to miss out on the easy pickings and then struggle later on. Anyway.
Yeah, that's because the mechanism for the defeating the Saracens, the Prussians, and the Slavs, those are the 3 enemy factions in the game. The Prussians and the Slavs have a mechanism whenever they get defeated and they start at power 3, you need 3 power to defeat them, they move to the next level on the track. So they go to 4 power. You need 4 power to beat them. Next time you beat a Slav, you need 5, and it just keeps going down that track. So you're right, Wayne. If I sit and try to build all my buildings in the Western Europe where there are no enemies, I could spend all that time doing it. But by the time I go to Crusade to go get some more points, y'all have already riled up the enemy. They're like at level 8. So I'm going to need a lot of Crusade points to be able to beat up some Slavs and some Prussians.
Yeah, and so actually one of my big things there to that point is this is a game where you are rewarded for being just good enough. In fact, that's exactly what you want to be. If something takes 4 power to defeat,
you don't want to spend 8 on it.
You want to be at 4 power. If something requires a 5 build, you want to use the build action when you have 5 build. Exactly.
Yep.
Being as efficient as possible and reading the board, like Wayne said, to get to there. I will say that, like a couple other games, I don't know if it's a weak point, but there are a couple of things that I've found in this game that if you don't do, you don't do very well. And that's actually 2. I don't want to give away too much of my
No, you got to give it all away.
BJ. I know.
It's a full Monty
advice.
Here, man. Full Monty.
You need the second night early. You do. Build the castle so that you get your second night early. If you're playing the game for too long with only the one night, you're just too limited. You want to be able to have the second night. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Find a way to build that castle so you get so you get +1 movement, and then you get +1 movement again with a second night. I think it takes 2 castles to get that. Then you can stop building castles unless you have a real strong reason to do so. The other one is get your muster to 6, because that faction that doesn't get stronger requires 6. And in the meantime, working your
Saracens start at 6 and stay at 6 for their power level.
And in the meantime, as you're getting the muster up through 4, 5, and 6, you can be chipping away at the ones that only take 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then you get your muster to 6, and now it becomes a racing game of great, easy pickings. They're not getting any stronger. If I can start claiming that faction there.
The Saracen faction, you're right, because the Saracen faction, the bonus that you get for defeating the Prussians and the Slavs are victory points equal to their power level. Mm-hmm. The Saracens are different. They start at 6, they stay at 6, but their bonus is you're capturing their building. It could be a castle, it could be a church, it could be a bank, it could be a farm, or it could be a muster action for free. So you're getting free actions for beating up Saracens.
At no matter what the cost to you would have been. And that is the big thing there. I've definitely run away with games where I get my muster to 6 and then defeated the Saracen, which gave me the 7 for free, and then did another one. There was like 2 of them. I got the 8 for free. And it's like, are you kidding me? I can now just defeat everyone. And those would have been so expensive for me to do another way. So those are my 2, especially if you're new to the game early, just kind of want to put your head down and say, give me something early game to focus on. Get your second knight, and in doing so, you'll increase your movement speed at the same time by building castles, and then get your muster slowly, efficiently to 6, and then read the board and see what you need to do.
So we haven't heard from Rob yet, but we're waiting for the best for last because he's won most of the games we've played. So he's going to have the best advice. So he's going to tell us all
I'm
exactly
at like a 99% loss ratio, so
he hasn't played me yet, but that's fine.
So I think I've learned, like what I did in the last game we played, is I definitely learned the lesson that Nick talked about is just being just good enough. Because there were so many times I took an action where it was movement and I only needed 2 and I had a 4. And I'm like, well, that was wasted movement. Or you have to really like make sure that you're not overpaying for things that you don't need to, right? So I learned that lesson. But then the question I have, and this is something that I think Rob and Nick might be able to talk about, is so the Saracens, like they're worth 6. You defeat them for 6, but then they give you other benefits. Whereas the other factions, they'll give you victory points. So I have read online some people say like they stay away from the Saracens and they target the other factions, because defeating the other factions gives you victory points, gives you the thing. And if you ramp them up, they're worth 6, 7 every time you defeat them. The value of fighting them, crusading against them is a better value sometimes than, depending on what you get from the Saracens, the value of fighting the other guys might actually be better.
Let's talk, before we get too deep into victory points, we do have to talk about that. This is not a zero-sum. This is a zero-sum game. There is a fixed number of victory points in the game, right? So it's 60 points per player plus 20, right? 60 points per player plus 20. So in a 4-player game, there's only 200 victory points to dole out. So Wayne, there is
trigger
a
the end
part
game,
of that.
But you can go over that though, right?
Yes, you can to trigger the end game, but there's not an unlimited number of points out there to grab. So by having to make those decisions on, do I do things that engine build or do I do things that take away points from the limited pool is a thing to think about. But I do want to hear from Rob because he's way better at this than me.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm sitting here quietly just taking it all in. And to some extent, here we go again. I know, Wayne, you and I and Mitchell have done this week after week after week, and we have such different strategies. And I will agree with a little bit of what Nick said, that efficiency is important. When you have the opportunity to do a thing, you want to do it. You don't want to waste. You don't want to get extra. You don't want to, like you say, take an 8 power to beat something that only takes 4 or 5. As soon as you have that number, you want to be in the spot that you need to be at to take that action, get that done, and then move along to the next. I'm going to say I focus heavily on the buildings. Those buildings give you, as you build those buildings, they give you, each one of them gives you different kinds of pluses and advantages. And if you build the last building, I believe there's 4 in each row. If you build the last one, it is going to trigger some kind of in-game points or scoring or ability. And so we've played, 3 or 4 games in a row on BGA. Almost every game I've had almost all of my buildings out. I usually can clear at least 2 rows entirely, and then the other 2 I have at least halfway down or 2/3 of the way down. I pick off the bad guys, the Saracens and the Prussians, and I pick them off as I kind of go, because I have to take actions because of the rondel. You eventually have to take actions to move. You have to take actions to fight. You have to take actions to muster, and I just do those things as I get, enough pegs on those boards to take that action. So as soon as I hit the 1 to muster, and my next muster is 4, as soon as I have a tile that allows me to muster at 4, I go ahead and do that. That'll move those chits off. That'll do an action. It'll do a thing. It's not a wasted turn. So for me, it's efficiency. I'm trying not to waste turns. I'm trying to every time do something, and trying to keep those pegs laid out that way. Speaking about upgrading tiles, I want to come back to that just briefly. I completely ignore upgrading tiles unless one of two things happens. Unless I need to redistribute my pegs. I call them pegs, but the little hexagons.
The action tokens.
Action tokens, there you go. If I need to redistribute, one of the advantages of when you upgrade a tile, it allows you to pick any of your tiles. It doesn't have to be the one you upgraded, but you pick any of them, and then you can redistribute around the rondelle depending on your ability, sometimes clockwise, sometimes counterclockwise, because we haven't touched on this as asymmetric. At the beginning, you're going to get a couple of different knights or leaders or whoever, and you choose whoever your leader's going to be.
Order of knights.
Order of Knights, okay. And
I'll keep the theme going here.
Keep me straight. There you go. And that, we move some pegs, we do some things, but no. So depending on, some of them allow you to go clockwise, some of them allow you to choose, a card, a thing. But I don't upgrade unless I need to redistribute, or if there's just, I've got a bunch of the action tokens sitting on a wedge, and I know I end up one of those situations where I have 8, and I know I only need 4 to battle. But if I can upgrade that token and that tile and allow me
that wedge.
to,
Interesting.
a wedge. There you go, that wedge, and it will allow me to do something else, maybe an attack and move, or maybe a build in a crusade or something. Then I'll flip it at that point, because again, I can redistribute some more. I can get one more action token probably on that tile, and then I can do 2 things instead of 1. So that gets back to the efficiency. But
So one thing I want to talk about is a easily forgotten rule. A lot of people mess this up. When you upgrade a wedge, you then may, it's a may, distribute any other wedge's action points. And a lot of people get that wrong. They think if I upgrade this wedge, I have to distribute those action points.
I got that
no,
wrong.
if you have an 8 built up of action points somewhere, you can upgrade any wedge and then distribute that other wedge.
Yeah, I mentioned that, but you can choose any wedge you want and upgrade them and redistribute. So again, I can do that to take, if there's an action there that I really wasn't excited about taking anyway, I can redistribute those, even if it's just 1 or 2 pegs, just 1 or 2 action tokens, get one more on that action that I want to do and make it even that much more powerful. So
I learned a rule I missed tonight.
there you go.
And that's I think, Rob, you're hitting it on the head as far as the upgrade. I didn't even talk about upgrading, but yes, you upgrade as almost a filler turn when you don't have a clearly defined, I need a 4 to build, so I'm going to build. I need a 5 to crusade, so I'm going to crusade. I will say that upgrading a couple of your wedges is important by the end of the game for being able to grab some of those points from your opponents when you get the big moves. The move and build, or move and crusade, and then crusade and build, I feel dirty doing it, because I'm actually not as cutthroat as people think, but there is something dirty but perfect at the same time about if your knight is on a spot and you clearly intend, I can see your wedge, you clearly intend to build at the vacant spot where you're there, and I've got to move and build, and I just move and build, and now your whole plan is messed up. Being able to do that with the move and crusade, or move and build, and then crusade and build is critical. I will say that I make heavy use of the I forget the name of the faction. The faction that's always 6, my favorite faction. I do those so I get the free builds.
The Saracens,
Yeah,
So
it's effectively an upgraded wedge feel to me. It's a crusade and build action without having to actually upgrade.
Now, you don't get the victory points had you built that building, because in this game there are 4 levels of each building. Whenever you build one of those buildings, you get a number of victory points equal to that level. So you don't get that extra victory points. But man, that's a completely free action. And action economy is huge.
And you do get points for defeating. I mean, I remember
You don't get points for defeating the Saracens. You only get to take their building. That's it. You don't get any points. Now you choose between either 3 victory points or taking that building bonus for that Saracen. But taking that building bonus is an action you never have to spend.
Yeah.
And
That's
so maybe
huge.
another noob thing here is someone that's still kind of learning the game, and that's kind of cool about the dice devices. I played the game 3 or 4 times, but I'm still learning. So move and build. So if you have enough, if you have a tile that's been upgraded that has both the move and build action on it, and you have enough tokens there to move And the leftover tokens, you could transfer those to build. Maybe I have done it. I can't just remember it, but I didn't realize that too. Is like if you upgraded a tile and you have enough, action points on it, you could do both the actions on it. And I think I had that before, where I have like mustard, and then you can still do.
I'm certain that you've moved into
probably.
My
Yeah,
spot
probably just might not realize.
Well, I was just saying, I did it to you twice last time we played, Carlos. And purposely, I was trying to leave Wayne alone, and twice I moved on to spots you were on.
Well, and I think it's interesting is I think like in the games we played, Rob, I've gotten better as we've gone on in the games, and the point difference between you and I in the last 2 games wasn't tremendous, and so I wonder if maybe I'm wasting actions upgrading tiles that I shouldn't, and then if I didn't upgrade, I might close that gap even more, because I think we were only like 10 or 15. I think a 10
less
or 15
than
point.
that. I think less than that y'all spread. Now I was down like 20 points to any of y'all.
Yeah.
I just can't figure this game out.
I feel like now you guys, like Nick and Rob, a 10-point difference between 2 players is probably not that significant, but it's probably it's tight. 1 or 2 action difference. So if I didn't upgrade a tile and took an extra action, which gave me a few extra points, it would shrink that gap even more. So.
Or to Rob's point, one building that gives you an end game scoring thing. I really like building all of my castles. And I'm almost positive the end game of that one is every then set of all 3.
There's 3 types of enemies for each set. You're going to get 4 bonus points.
In addition,
now
to
the churches is going to give you 6 flat out victory points at the end of the game. If you built that last church, if you built the 4th and final farm, you're going to get 1 victory point per knight and troop. So every troop is the muster actions. There's 5 of them. You can muster up to 5 armies. So you can get up to 8 points for that building, that last building for the farms. And then finally the banks. If you build the last bank, you're going to get 4. That's Rob's favorite. You're going to get 4 victory points for every level 4 building that you've built, including that bank. So it's up to 16 additional points at the end of the game if you've built all the 4 buildings.
So it seems like the castles are really powerful if you're going to do
a
ton of crusading.
If you're going to go
not going to crusade
crusading.
a bunch, if you're going to crusade a bunch, build the castles.
Yeah, I've absolutely gotten, and in fact, I consider it kind of a goal in a lot of my games to get 3 full sets. So finish my castles and get 3 full sets for 12 points at the end there.
Yeah.
I pretty much always look to get all my castles out and my banks out as a minimum.
I feel like the churches are like the last thing that I want to build.
Yeah.
Like I just don't feel like, because churches improve your influence action, right? Which I hate taking.
Yep.
I know, Wayne, you like taking influence action.
It did well. Hey, I did pretty well that one game.
I will upgrade and distribute stuff off of influence all day. No problem. Yep. And then farms, I like the idea of farms because of that mustering. But right about mid-game, I have already mustered everything, and my farms are useless. And I feel like every time a action token ends up on my muster wedge, I get mad. Like, I've already mustered every army, and I got all these action tokens sitting there. So that's a wedge that I want to improve because it adds the influence action to the muster wedge. But I already said I hate taking the influence action. So now my muster is also an influence action. I got 2 wedges that are influence actions. But listen, folks, don't listen to me because I suck at this game.
But I think what you're pointing to, what you're saying is like there's synergies, right? So castle and bank, church and farm, muster and influence, for you can kind of combo those to make some efficiencies. And I think and what I've gone in and read some reviews and strategies, and people are basically saying that you can kind of win with any of those strategies if you focus on it and if you make sure that your decisions beginning game lead to that sort of end game point where you want to be. And I think like I said, I don't know, 4 or 5 games in on BGA, I think what's lost on BGA is some of that synergy stuff, and like I'm not even really paying attention to building all my buildings, and not even realizing that you build all the buildings of a certain kind, and there's an end game scoring. So that's the one downside to learning games on BGA is you miss some of the nuances of that end game scoring or those kind of synergies that you can get into. And so hey, this Dice Advice has taught me a few things. So I'm ready to play the next game with you all.
We did our job.
I was going to say we definitely need to.
Set up a 4-player game.
Spin up a 4-player game real quick. I don't think Rob and I have played on BGA. I'm excited.
I don't think we have either. Yeah.
We have to play in person at Your Turn Con.
Just do it.
And that's the next thing I was going to talk about I was talking about how sucky the influence action is, right? And that's a technical term in the board game industry.
I scored a crap ton of points in that one game.
No, you did it wrong.
Did I? Oh, I only lost to Rob by like 5-6 points.
No, that's good. That's good. Real quick, actually, since we are making sure that we cover things, when you do split actions between an upgraded wedge, Wayne, you were talking about how like that it becomes an important part, especially for the move end build or move end crusade. You do need to dedicate at least one of your action tokens to the actions you want to take. So even though, for instance, like the castles give you +1 movement, you don't get all of that movement unless you put one token, but that should then be your goal, and that's how you get those really nice little double things. You just put one token into movement, and then you end up still having like 4 movement points.
All your bonuses,
it's great. It's great. Now, I will say...
Really, I think you're only going to get up to... There's an additional 2 movement points that you can get from the castles.
I think it's
right.
2,
I think you're never going to get more than 2 more movement points, I believe, when you upgrade your castles.
A different one, but yeah.
Yeah, it's castle number 2 is going to give you a travel.
Right.
And then church number 3, oh, look, the church became more important to me.
Yeah.
Gives you that second travel.
Yep.
So you need church number 3 to get that second travel. So with one action point, you'll never have more than 3 movement.
Gotcha. Which is still, if you've marched across the board at that point, 3 movement should be all you need. You just need to hop and do something else. Now, I will say, and I want to see this play out, I actually tend to not pay attention much to my building strength, to that bottom row, the banks that Rob seems to love.
I love the banks. My favorite.
Yeah, I go castles and muster, and then just use my muster to do the things I need to do. Obviously, you got to build banks at some point, or it'll just end up swinging around, and you'll end up having 5 tokens on the build, and oh, good, now I can build.
Yeah. Rob just loves his inner dwarf, where he's going to hoard all the money.
Yeah, little green guts there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, historically, it was the Knights' Orders that created the modern day banking system.
The Knights Templar are the founders of the original banking system. They would lend money, and so
we're learning something.
Yes, if you were a French or English, say monarch or knight or lord or whatever, you would go to the local Knights Templar temple in your town. You would turn in your French money. And they would give you a writ, and then if you traveled to another country or to the Middle East, you would then turn that writ in, and they would provide you funding or money from that region or banking. And that's ultimately why Black Friday is what it is, because on Friday the 13th, the French king basically sacked all of the Templar temples on the same day, trying to get all their money, and none of it was there. And that's the whole legend of the Templar treasures that have been, in all the movies and books. And there's tons of things.
I've read a lot of history.
I've read a lot of history on the Templars and stuff. Yes, and
cool.
Yeah, there's some cool.
And I've done a lot of documentary watching on the Knights as well. And for example, in here they also talk about the Knights Hospitaller.
Yes,
that's where you get hospitals from. They were that order. Their whole thing was about putting up hospitals and churches and healing and helping. And their symbol was a cross. Like a Red Cross that you're thinking of. Yeah. The symmetrical
they were
cross.
A brown field with a white cross.
Right, it was a white cross, but that's where you get the whole idea of hospitals from, the Knights Hospitaller. There's a whole section in here in Crusaders about the history of each of the orders. So, I mean, I'm really digging this game. I know this isn't a review, but in my final thoughts on the game, I am going to talk a little bit about why I think you should buy this game. But before we end up the segment, I wanted to talk about how bad the influence action was. It was so bad that they created the next expansion on improving the influence action. The next expansion is called the Divine Influence. We have yet to get it to the table. It actually improves the influence action and makes it something even more important. It improves your ability to travel. It improves by adding another endgame scoring bonus based on how much influence you've put out there. So we will get this played at Your Turn Con, hopefully multiple games after that as well, and then come back to you for part deux of the Crusaders Dice Advice. It'll be the Divine Influence edition. So final thoughts on Crusaders. We'll go around the horn, starting with Rob. Final thoughts. You can give it a quick review, or you can give your last bit of advice. Your choice.
Well, this is a new thing. Okay, hitting us with something out of left field here. I've done this before.
That's how I do.
Okay. Gosh, I don't know.
You like the game? Hate the game?
I like the game.
Shouldn't play
it's
it.
Fun. Yeah, I recommend it. It's one we all enjoy. So yeah, it's a great game.
All right, Wayne. Any final thoughts on Crusaders?
I like it. I think it's the game. It's a game that I like games that take multiple plays to master, and so like you can, and it has multiple strategies. I think that's where the niche of this is the beginning game, setting up your end game strategy, and sort of building to that. It's a fun game. I'm excited that it's still going to be produced. So yeah, it's definitely a game I'm looking forward to playing it in person. So.
Mr. Oben, any final thoughts?
Yeah, great game. We've talked a lot about picking the right action at the right time. And of course, we talked about the rondelle, but I will say that that's a mechanic that I love. This game, I think, does it as well as any rondelle system out there. The idea of needing to be able to move your action pegs around in a deterministic order and plan for that is great. And then the last little bit of advice is, because we just touched on the slight asymmetric nature with those different knight orders. If you get the one that gives you the 13th action peg, you take that one. Like that's it. That's my last level advice. There is never a turn where having more action pegs than your opponents is a bad thing.
True.
It's useful every turn.
The Alcantara or the Order of Alcantara. Alcantara.
Part 2.
And you can upgrade a wedge right there. So you place a 13th token, and you get an immediate upgrade right up front.
That's a good one. That's a really good one, yeah.
So that's the right answer.
Yep.
Jumping back in, I think about the rondelle, the one point that I forgot to mention, the one thing I love about this rondelle is a lot of other rondelle games, you're picking up your tokens and you're separating it, and where you end up is what you play. This is the opposite. You start with you use what your tokens are on to start and then go around. So there's a different level of planning there as far as going, well, I'm going to pick up all my pictures and that's what versus I'm starting with this one, doing my action, then spreading it out. So it's a slightly different rondelle than a lot of games have, which I like.
Yeah, and Wayne, that was going to be my final thought. I've taught this game to my wife. She immediately fell in love with it. And what she said on that first play was, I liked how with this system, I can immediately remove these options. Like these wedges with 1 or 2 action points on them, I'm not even going to think about it. I'm going to look at the ones that have the action points on them, and then I can decide of those bigger ones which one I want to take, and that help reduce that thinking, that thought processing, narrow it down to 3 actions or 4 actions versus all 6. So that was pretty cool to hear from someone getting into the gaming aspect. So that's our final thoughts on Crusaders by Seth Jaffe. Stick around for the main course, where we're going to get Rob's rundown on his trip to St. Louis for Stonemaier Design Day.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my recent trip to St. Louis for the Stonemaier Design Day. Carlos and I went last year. He was unable to go this year, so I went with Dan Erdzik from Your Turn, a Board Game Cafe. The two of us flew up. We took different flights getting up there, so I arrived. He beat me there by a couple hours, so he hung out at the airport and waited for me to arrive so we could catch an Uber over to
that's nice of him.
Yeah, to the Airbnb that we were staying at. So he just hung out and got some things done at the airport. But I got up there. I think I landed just after midnight on Friday night, and so we got over to the Airbnb at about 1 a.m. So one of the first highlights of our trip, we try to get into the Airbnb, and Dan sets off the alarm. So the alarm's going off. We're worried about waking up the neighbors at 1 a.m. and stumbling into our Airbnb. The houses, literally, we could lean out the windows on both sides and touch the houses next to us. So they were real close. But anyway, so he gets online with the guy on the chat, and the guy remotely turns off the alarm after about 4 or 5 minutes. So that was a nice way to kick off our trip. But in any case, the design day's on Sunday, so we just kind of hung out on Saturday. Dan wasn't too much into sightseeing, so we walked to the grocery store, loaded up on some groceries. We went out to dinner. Salt and Smoke is a nice little restaurant.
Oh yeah, you and I went there last year in 2020.
Yep, barbecue restaurant.
2021.
5 or 6 of them, last year. Yep. So they've got about 5 or 6 of the locations. We had one that was, I think it was 0.8 miles from where we were at, so we just walked over and had a big barbecue dinner, and then we had some whiskey afterwards.
I think they hold the record for the largest whiskey menu on this side of the Mississippi.
Yeah, it was impressive. They got a whole wall. Each one of their locations is just a whole wall, and you just choose from whatever. So we decided to hit up a flight. So we tried, I think it was 3 different ones. There was a Japanese one. Actually, I didn't write it down. I took a picture of it, but really good. Both of us were raving about that one. Actually, Dan went online and I bought a bottle online right while we were sitting there at the restaurant. But in any case, that was our Saturday. Stonemeyer Design Day on Sunday. It's an all-day event, and so what it is Jamie Stegmeyer from Stonemeyer Games hosts an annual event. This is, I think, the 8th or 9th one he's done, from what I was hearing. I talked to a guy there that's been to every single one of them. And he started out with hosting it for local St. Louis area game designers. It has grown, and this year there was, I met a designer from L.A. who had flown in from California. There was another one that came in from Michigan. So people were coming in from all over the country. But the main idea is Jamie tries to just promote, at least in the St. Louis area, an event where designers can get together. It's about 80% of the people. It was right at 100 people. I think they capped it at 100. And it was about 80% designers. It was people there who either had designed games in the past or currently are designing games and showing off their games. Jamie last year for the first time invited content creators, and so that's how Carlos and I got in on it last year. We were one of, I think, 3 content creators that were invited last year, and I think we were one this year of only 5, so there was a couple of more this year, and I got to meet a couple of new people there. But the idea, again, is for games that are in the design process, all stages. I played a game that was very early in the design process. I played one that was pretty much finished and was ready to hit the market, hit Kickstarter. He said probably within the next couple of months. But again, long story short, just kind of spending all day playing. So what happens is you go on ahead of time, you sign up for games. There's very brief descriptions, like little 2-sentence descriptions. There's a listing of the types of mechanics that the designer will tell you about the game, and then you get the title of the game, sometimes a working title that they have for it. But that started at 9 a.m. on Saturday at a place called Pieces Board Game Cafe. And so it's a nice little board game cafe. They got a full bar there, but they serve you the breakfast, lunch, and dinner so that you don't have to leave the premise. And you spend all day until I think it was 6 p.m. is when it ended. We spent all day just kind of playing games. And so I got to play 5 games. Dan also played 5 games. We were trying to kind of stay together so we could compare notes and talk about the games that we got to play. Although one of the time slots, we couldn't get into a game together, so he got to go play a different game than I did. There were about 20 different designers and about 20 different games that were played. I'm going to give just a real brief rundown. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail on these, but I just wanted to hit up what I did play and mention the names of the designers in just like a little maybe 1 minute on each one. But the first game Dan and I both played together was a card game. This was the one that was pretty much done. The designer, Charles Strelo, mentioned that he had been playtesting this for a couple of years, that he had just had some intensive playtesting of it at Gen Con, and had mentioned that they were pretty much done with it. It was pretty polished. It's in a little clear plastic container that's just a deck of cards. And it's 3 to 9 players, plays in 20 to 30 minutes. It's called Shape Up with an exclamation point at the end. And just a real quick, it's described as card counting and player elimination. So I normally am not crazy about player elimination in games, but this was 20 to 30 minutes, so it's quick enough that if you get eliminated, usually you're only going to sit for about 5 minutes, and then you're probably going to re-queue it and play it again. But this is just a deck of cards. There were 3 colors, 3 shapes, and 3 numbers that are throughout the deck. And it was circles, triangles, or squares were the 3 so each card has either a circle, triangle, or square on it. It has a number, a 1, 2, or a 3, and then it has a color, red, blue, or green. So there's one of each of those types of cards. There's 1 red circle in the whole deck. There's 1 red triangle in the deck, 1 red square. So go on through all the permutations. Somebody who's better at math than me can do the 3 cubed there and figure out how many cards there are on the deck. But in any case, however many people you're playing with, there's a hidden identity idea behind it. Each person takes 1 card, and that is your identity for the game. And then as you play, just briefly, you have four options on your turn. You can either draw 2 cards off the top of the deck and play one out into the display, or you can try to guess someone else's identity. If you get it correct by naming the color, the shape, and the number that's on their card, you eliminate them. That's where the player elimination is. Or you can declare that you think you have the most points. So for every one of those parameters, number, letter, or number, shape, or color, you get 1 point from your hand based on what's out in the display. And so you're just playing through till either everybody's eliminated or somebody declares, shows, and then everybody compares scores. And if they had the most, they win. If they don't, they're eliminated, and the game goes on with the people who are left over. So really good, quick game, light party-type game. And like I said, that one was pretty much done. The next one I got to play was a game called Work of Art from Chris Stevens. It is based heavily on fantasy realms, but it's the idea. It's 3 to 6 players, 30 to 60 minutes. It's described as resource management and card play. This is a game that was very early in the design process. He mentioned he's been working on it for about a year or two, and he's made lots and lots of changes. He actually made a major overhaul of it right before we got to play it, and mentioned that it was kind of a completely different game than he had been working on for the last year and a half. But you're playing as a budding artist. His description, struggling to achieve your creative goals while making enough to survive. And so you have 6 parameters in the game: body, mind, and soul. And you're basically using those parameters. You're drafting cards and playing cards. That the fantasy realms part of it is there's these keywords: body, mind, soul, and then popularity, prestige, and profit. But you're usually expending, for the most part, body, mind, or soul, which starts on a scale that's at 0 and can go down to -10. And then you're trying to boost your popularity, your prestige, and your profit. And everybody at the beginning of the game, based on some original cards you have, is ranking 1, 2, 3 between popularity, prestige, and profit, what they want to excel at. It's an asymmetric game. You get some asymmetric power starting out. You play through 3 rounds of drafting some cards. The Fantasy Realms part of it is you're picking up a card from the middle of the table or off the top of the deck, and then you're playing a card face up into the middle of the table. The game ends once there are, I believe it was 8 cards out, or the round ends, not the game. The round ends once there's 8 cards face up. So it's got a very Fantasy Realms feel that you can delay the game by picking up from the middle and then putting a card back in the middle, thus not increasing the total of cards face up. But once somebody draws off the top of the deck and plays that 8th card face up, triggers the end of the round, you do a scoring, and then you do that 3 times, and then at the end you total up the points, and whoever's ahead wins. So that one, that game needed some work. The designer understood. He was very open to feedback, and so we gave lots of feedback. We spent actually a good 30 minutes after the game giving him some ideas and some notes on some things that he might want to work on and change. But had some good ideas there. And then the last thing on that, actually, I got to just mention, this is not up my alley, but at the end, everybody describes what their life of their artist was. You go through these cards you draft have little stories on them, and so everybody has
your favorite part,
story.
Rob.
Yeah, well, yeah, I hated it. Everybody loved it. Dan was super into it. He was telling this big flowery story, and he came over to me, and I was like, yeah, I expended some of my body to get my popularity up and made some money, and I died. So it was mine was real brief, but yeah. Anyway, not my storytelling's not my big part of it, but. Next one I played, a game called, I'll just briefly hit this one, Roly Poly Hokey Pokey. This is a kids game targeted at kids 8 and up. It was 2 to 4 players, 15 minutes. The cool thing about this one is the designer, Patrick Blindauer probably. He took a Lazy Susan. If hopefully most people know what a Lazy Susan is, but it's used sometimes on tables, dinner tables. It's a round top. It spins around, so people can put condiments on it or whatever, and you kind of spin it, so people on the other side of the table can reach the mustard or the ketchup or whatever. But he took a Lazy Susan and he kind of built up some walls around the sides of it, so it had high edges. But it's a dice rolling game where you are rolling a die onto the Lazy Susan, and he puts a stack of chips in the middle worth 1 or 2 points. And so when you roll the die, you're trying to knock it to spread out the chips. And then there are 6 wedges on the Lazy Susan of 6 different colors. And so when you roll the die, it's got body parts on it, like elbow, knee, head. And when you roll the die, you are going to then draw a chip out of a bag, either a 1 or 2 point chip, and you're going to have to drop the chip on the spinning Lazy Susan. So what you do is after you roll the die, you declare a color. And what you're trying to do is land in the area that have other chips in it, because if your chip lands there, you get to collect that all the chips in that color wedge. And so you might say green is one of the 6 colors. Then you spin the Lazy Susan, and then you have to drop the chip either from the body part that you rolled. So if it's off your knee, you hold your knee up, you kind of stand over the Lazy Susan, and you flick it off into the spinning Lazy Susan, and you're hoping that your chip lands in the green that you announced. The chips all have 1s or 2s on them. That's the point value. But also another mechanic of the game is that wherever it lands, you can move the chip that many wedges to try to get to the wedge that you named. So if I named green, but I landed on the adjacent red, and it's a 1-point chip, I can then move it 1 spot over to be into the green that I had called out, and then I'm going to collect all the chips that were sitting in the green area. So design he's been working on not too long. We again had some ideas for him, had some feedback, but it was a fun little game. It plays real quick, 10-15 minutes. We reset it and played it several times, and then we talked about it quite a bit afterwards. So a couple more games here. We played one called Cryptocurrency. Actually, you met the designer. We played one of this designer's games, I think, last year, Maddie Schrader. This one was called Cryptocurrency. And she has a prior game that I was not familiar with, but Dan knew really well. He's got it at your turn, called Heckin' Hounds. Was her first produced game or a published game. And this, she's, I think, working with the same publisher for this game. And kind of a neat game. It's really poking fun at cryptocurrency. It's making fun of the whole thing. So it's 2 to 6 players, 30 to 45 minutes. The description is satirical economic simulator, making fun of the cryptocurrencies. It's definitely an economic simulator. You're trading in cryptocurrencies for other cryptocurrencies. I think there's 6 or 7. Actually, I've listed them all here. I think 6 in the game. And kind of the funny part of it, the art in it was fantastic. The art, it was these cats from, I guess, famous cats throughout history, which I wasn't familiar with most of them, but there was Cerberus, Deathpaw, Palgrave, Sudachi, Tom Dyer, Evil Molly, and Mops. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, actually it was 7 different types of cats, but they all have an asymmetric ability. And so when you draft long story short, I won't get into all the details, but when you buy a cryptocurrency with one of these cats, it gives you some kind of ability just for having that at a end of round kind of scoring phase. If you also have the most of that type of cryptocurrency, of that type of cat, you get an additional bonus at the end of the round. So, but there's a whole thing about when you buy it, obviously the value goes up, so you're trying to buy low, push up the values, use their abilities, and then maybe get rid of them or trade them in for other cryptocurrencies, and you're playing this whole market economic simulator. But it was a lot of fun, and the artwork was really fantastic. That's one definitely keep an eye out for. Dan and I both enjoyed it. Another game that was pretty well polished and was pretty close to probably hitting the market here pretty soon. So got to play a game called Stamp Swap. I don't know if any of you ever heard about this one yet, but this was actually from the designer of several pretty well-known games, most recently Honeybuzz, the designer Paul Solomon. Also designed Periodic, a game of the periodic elements, and designed Genotype, which actually is another game that recently was a big hit. So Paul Solomon designed all of those, and he kind of told us a little story as we were playing that he recently has become fascinated with stamp trading, kind of an old hobby, but he's gotten into it just in the last year or two, and he just decided, with his newfound passion of stamp trading and stamp collecting, that he wanted to make a game about it. And this one is also very polished. It was very close to a finished product, but it's 3 to 6 players, 30 to 45 minutes. I have no doubt that this is going to be the talk when it comes out. It's definitely a mashup of some different mechanisms. There's set collection, I cut, you choose, which is actually a mechanism that I like quite a bit that's not been in a lot of games. And then tile laying. There's a tile laying aspect of it. You've got a stamp book, and you're trying to lay out these stamps as you draft them, and then you do this I cut, you choose mechanic to get piles of stamps. to then place into your stamp book. It's 3 rounds. Each round has a variable goal that you're trying to reach. It changes. There's a little stack of tiles that you set out before so people know what's going to score in each round, but the game changes every time you play it. There's enough different tiles that each game you're just going to randomly draw out some objectives, but you're collecting these stamps. There's a draft phase where you're just drafting. Everybody just really, really fast. You just take a stamp, take a stamp, take a stamp, take a stamp, and then once all the stamps are gone, everybody divides them into 2 piles in front of them. You can divide them however you want. You get to keep one, but then you divide all the rest of the stamps that you drafted into 2 piles, and then you go around, and the I cut, you choose ideas that each person then can take one of the stacks in front of somebody else. The stack they don't take, you get to keep for yourself. So you're trying to put out kind of 2 equal stacks out there because you don't want to make one too juicy where everybody's going to take it, and you're going to get whatever's left over. So it's that kind of fun mind game there. But everybody does that, and then once it's done, you're going to lay out the stamps in your book, and then you're going to score whatever the scoring was for that round. And you do that for 3 rounds, and then there's an in-game scoring that happens with another objective on it. But again, there's no doubt this one's going to be a hit, especially from his prior titles. The last, again, 2, Honey Buzz and Genotype, were both big hits. So I have a feeling Paul's got another pretty good hit on his hands. So the last game Dan and I got to play was called Emissary. And this is, during the design day, you may remember, Carlos, usually at the end of the day, the last couple of slots they have go from early on in the design day, your slots are like little 30, 45 minutes slots. And so you're kind of jumping from game to game. Later in the day, they bring out the big guns, and so it's 2.5-hour slots later in the day. So this Emissary game we got to play, designed by Joshua Phillips. It's his first design, and it's a 4X game. And so anybody who knows the 4X, so it's Explore, Exterminate, Expand, and I always forget that 4th X, but there's another
Exploit.
Exploit. There you go, Exploit. So I won't get into too much detail.
I didn't think your people would forget that one.
Exploit. Oh, yeah. Well, we tend to forget. But 2 to 6 players, 90 to 120 minutes. His description, 4X, worker placement, asymmetric. You have asymmetric starting abilities coming into the game. This interesting thing about this one, though, for a 4X game, is this one is story-driven. There's a story that you're actually playing through, and there is some semi-cooperative feeling to it. The scenario we got to play, he's going to have different scenarios, but the one we got to play is there was a Delphi, an alien that we were all representing different races on this planet that were trying to explore and were trying to exploit the planet. But then a alien race, a superior race, a Delphi, drops in. He's this big metal being, and he promises us some technology. He's trying to get back to his home, but he needs our help. And so he promises us some technology if we will help him collect the resources he needs to build a giant radio telescope so that he can ET phone home and get his people to come pick him up off of this planet. So we are kind of semi-cooperatively working together to gather resources and to give them to the Delphi, and then whoever contributes resources to, there's 3 different types of technologies. There's 3 stacks of cards, and as you gather resources, you kind of place them on these cards, and then once they accelerate, the early ones, only 2 people need to contribute, then 3 people need to contribute, then 4 people need to contribute. But once that happens, each person gets the technology. So the technology card gets handed out, and it gives you a kind of a thing you can do on your turn, some kind of ability that breaks the game. And it's really cool. There was a point near the end where we thought we were about done with the game, and then something happened. I won't give away all the details, but then we opened another little story, and there's another little bit of reading, and then now we are all having to make a decision to either work entirely cooperatively to do something that's going to give us all points depending on how we contribute, or to work against the group to try to make the group fail, in which case certain people will lose points. So anyway, was a lot of fun. That one still needed some work. There was we had a lot of components that were borrowed from other games and stuff, which will happen when you're playing prototypes. But this one was a little earlier in the design process, and this one's a big project. It's got a lot going on, so that one definitely needed some more work and some more polishing. But it was fun. Dan enjoyed that one more than I did. He tends to like, I think, bigger, longer games a little bit more than I do as well. But that was it. So after that, I know last year, Carlos, I just wanted to hit on at the end of the design day, we talk about all the time when we talked on the show about how we stayed late. We closed the place down to, I think, 11 or 12 o'clock. We were playing brass in the back room. This year, I had prepped Dan for that. I said, after it ends at like 6 o'clock, we're probably going to stay up all night and play games. But this year, for whatever reason, almost everybody left after it was over within an hour. They served us dinner, and so we all eat dinner. And then it's just, after that, it was a big exodus. I know Jamie.
We didn't leave until they told us we had to leave.
Yeah, Jamie left early. His wife was sick, so he had to leave early and tend to her. So he left kind of right as they were serving the dinner part of it. But Dan and I stayed, and we played one game of patchwork, actually just 2-player patchwork by ourselves because there was almost nobody there. And then we decided to go back to the room, and we played some Arkham. But just to wrap up the story, so we went back. We stayed at the Airbnb. We had taken some time off work, so Monday and Tuesday we just kind of hung out, mostly in the room. Again, Dan wasn't too excited about going out. He'd never been to St. Louis. I've been before, so I'd seen kind of the sights when we went last year, but he wasn't interested in that at all, so we actually played a lot of Arkham Horror, the LCG, the campaign that we've been working on. We got in 4 or 5 scenarios while we were there, and had a good time. But I'm definitely looking forward to going back. I got to talk to Jamie a little bit about the charity auction and everything that happened. He guaranteed me that the Wingspan Asia is on the boat, and as soon as it arrives, I know Wayne, you updated us a little earlier today in the chat about what was going on with that. But he said as soon as it hits, we'll get our copy, and that should be before pretty much anybody else is getting it. So we'll get a little preview of it hopefully before it hits the main market. But had a great time and talked to Jamie. He said, of course, we're welcome back for future years. So really looking forward to making the trip and doing it again next year.
Very cool. I think, just a correction, you mentioned his wife. I think it's his significant other.
Is it? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. All right.
But so games aside, I'm always interested because you always hear about unplugs and like people playtesting games, and like game developers or game designers are always looking for playtesters.
Yeah.
So how does that work when you're playtesting a game that's not published? Did you play the game? Is it just you had a conversation afterwards? Were they asking you to fill out a survey? Were you kind of like did you do any kind of like written report, or was it just all conversational? How did that work, and how did you feel playtesting a game that may be broken, and like where did you go with various games as you played them?
It definitely varies, and again, Carlos can probably chime in on this a little bit last year, because last year was the first time we'd ever done anything like this, both of us, and then this year was pretty much a mirror of the same kind of thing. But we had one of the designers was really not interested in feedback. I guess I can mention it was the one that was Shape Up, the first one we played. And again, it was pretty much a finished product. He told us before, that this is pretty much done. I'm just trying to get some final little bits of, balancing just to see if people are liking it, see how receptive it is. But he had already, the cards were already printed. They were full gloss. The packaging was already done. It was really a done product. And he mentioned again that he'd just done some final intense playtesting at Gen Con. And that after Gen Con, he kind of felt that this was a final thing. So there really wasn't. We made a few suggestions, and he was like, "Oh yeah, well, that's maybe a good idea, but this is pretty much a done thing." So, but that varies again. I would say the game, I think it was Work of Art. Yeah, Work of Art. He told us again that this was early in his process, and again he told us that he had just done a major overhaul on it before we played it. And we were fairly critical, and you kind of, it is kind of awkward a little bit, because at first you kind of throw something out there and you kind of wait and see how the designer reacts, because we were kind of throwing some things at him, and he was really good about. He had a notebook there, and everything we were saying, he was writing down as fast as he could. Chris Stevens was his name, and he was really open to conversation. We went back and forth. We spent probably a good at least 15 or 20 minutes after we were done playing, kind of, if you did this and maybe if you did that. The kids game that I played, Roly Poly Hokey Pokey, he actually mentioned when we sat down, he was a little flabbergasted actually, because the group that had played the game right before us, he told us, and I don't think I'm talking out of turn here, but he said, well, the group who just played completely redesigned my game. He said they basically told me they didn't like the game at all, and they completely redid it. He's like, so now I'm torn. I don't know whether we play the game that they just designed or we play my original game. And so he kind of sat there for a minute. He's like, you know what? He said, I came here to test my original game. I'm going to play my original game. He goes, and I told him, I said, well,
that's a lot of emotions.
Yeah, he was kind of shaken when we sat down with him. So, but he was a good sport about it. I mean, we played it. We had some recommendations, but I guess they were way different than the group before. And actually, I asked him afterwards. I was like, well, if you don't mind telling me, what did they tell you? What did they redesign? And then so he went through kind of the game that they had made up. They definitely had made it more of a gamer's game, and we kind of talked to him about maybe they had lost the sight of the fact that this was for kids 8 and up, and that this was supposed to be a little 10-minute game, and that you can reset it and play it over and over, and you can kind of bend the rules and things. But yeah, they had definitely made it more difficult. They had added some extra rules to it. They had made it more of a gamer's game, which you're going to get that. And he kind of made the comment that when he brings a game to an event like this, that there were a lot of bigger games, there were a lot of bigger designs. It was a lot of Euro-type games and 4X and stuff like that. So it's interesting. So it was the first time he'd ever done anything like this either, so I'm not sure that he knew what to expect. But, so it does vary, I guess, to answer your question, depending on who it is.
That's an interesting point is you have games that are ready to go, and the designer's really just looking for you to break it, or it's something that's going to, like a showstopper. Right. All the way to this. I just created this game in the last 2 weeks, and let's destroy it. And so that's interesting that like when you play test games, one, you have to be. It seems like you just have to play it knowing that there's going to be some issues. Two, you have to just be honest, and you have to be willing to be like not brutally honest, but just like and then you have to be willing to tell the designer where you don't like and what you don't like and what you love. You have to kind of. Like a lot of times when we review games, we look for the things we like, right? And we talk about those. We kind of shy away from what we don't like. But we think when you're playtesting a game, you have to really get into, well, this didn't work for me, and this is why. And I think it's interesting. You've interacted with a lot more game designers in person. Yeah, that's got to be tough, man. If you design a game, taking constructive criticism is tough. Taking criticism is tough in general. And if it's like a passion project for you. That takes some real thick skin to be able to sit there and take gamers just tearing apart your game. So that's gotta be that could be tough. But I'm sure, given Jamie and the environment that he tends to try to create, I'm sure it was kind of a very welcoming environment, and people were more open to that than others than other times probably.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you do see the difference between first-time designers, because most of them were first-time designers, but there were a few. That obviously that had done more games, and one of the first-time designers Dan and I talked to for a few minutes there specifically said that. He said, this is kind of weird for me. He said, I have to get over being defensive, because this is, in this case, he'd worked on the game for a couple of years, and then actually I think he said he'd put it aside for a couple of years, and he was just recently coming back to it. But he said, it's really hard not to be defensive. I tell people I want the feedback, and then when they start giving me stuff, my natural reaction is to defend. And he's like, people don't understand that I did this for a reason. This mechanism is in here because if it's not, it breaks something else. He goes, but you gotta, if you start telling people that, then you sound defensive, and then people shut down and they don't want to give you any more feedback. He said, so it's kind of a wire that you walk there a little bit, being, trying to ask people for their honesty, and then trying not to openly defend, why you didn't do something one way or another, and so it's tough on them, I imagine, for sure.
Rob, hey, quick question: how does the teach go at these kind of events? I assume obviously the designer is there teaching the game, but then do they have printed rule books, or if they don't, the designer just sit there the whole time and kind of like rules manage, or what? Great
question. Yeah, and I was thinking, actually, I was going to mention just a minute ago that jumped in my head and jumped back out. But this type of event, this particular event, it is a little different because there are the constraints, again, especially early in the day. There's just little, I think it's 45 or 50-minute windows that you're jumping from one game to the next game to the next game, and then we do a break for lunch. But they are completely taught, and they are the designer is there teaching it as quick as they can, because they want to get you into the game, and they want to see how you interact with the game. That is very different than some other events that I've heard about, and Carlos and I know have done that at Dice Tower before. We've play tested a few games at Dice Tower, and I'm trying to remember which Dice Tower it was, but it's not important. But anyway, usually the idea is, especially when there's a finished rule book, like you mentioned, Nick, the idea is that you don't want to walk people through the game. your goal, of course, is your audience eventually is going to, most of them are going to learn it either through the rule book or watching a video or something online. But you want to be able to just hand them the rule book, have them learn the game on their own from the rule book, and be able to play it correctly. And so this type of event, this particular event, doesn't have that luxury. But usually that is the ultimate goal, is that you won't have a designer obviously standing over your shoulder giving you suggestions on what you should do. So this one tends to be more about the mechanisms, more in how the game works. But yeah, that's very important usually when playtesting is making sure the rule book is a solid rule book and that you can learn how to play it from just the book.
Were there ever any moments where you're playing the game and a rule comes up and you're kind of like, are you sure? Like,
yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah,
and especially to the designer.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially in that work of art, we had several spots where he said, "You know what? I don't know. That hasn't come up." He admitted, he's like, "I played this game 100 times, but it's only been with 4 guys in my game group, 4 of my friends, and we've played it over and over and over again." And he said, "It's now that I'm here at an event like this, I realize that people think differently. They do things differently." And he goes, I didn't think about that. I never considered, I forget what the particular interaction was, but there was an interaction. He's like, I never thought of how that would interact and play out. So, let me make some notes. And kudos to him. I usually don't see this. He had all of his cards numbered so that he said, what card is that? Oh, card 23. Okay, I'm going to make a note here. Card 23. This is broken. I need to fix this. I need to tweak this, adjust this. So that was really good. That I haven't seen that a lot, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's interesting in that you have it points to why you have to diversify. If you're a game designer, you got to get hundreds of people trying this game, because if you play with your friends, you're gonna be in an echo chamber. My next question was actually not necessarily for Rob, but Carlos, you weren't able to attend this year, but you went last year.
Right.
What were your thoughts on being a playtester, and where were you on how you gave constructive criticism without crushing the game designer?
You know me, I'm really big on uplifting and helping people, feel good about putting their stuff out there. So I really had to dig deep to say, provide something critical, not just positive, but provide something critical in my feedback. And that took a lot out of me. I was worried about how they were going to take it, but I will tell you, Sans won. There was one.
Yeah, I remember one.
There was one last year.
Yeah, there was one that was pretty defensive. Yeah.
And I'm not going to blame them because, but everyone else was so gracious in how they took it. They took notes. So even if they took my thought and threw it away after the game, they made me feel like they listened to me, they wrote it down, and they were taking it back. I don't care if they didn't do anything with it, but at least they gave me the presence or the feeling that they listened to me. So I felt good about that entire experience. And really, the games weren't designed poorly. I can't think of any. There was that one game, the one where it was like that large social game. That was probably the lowest moment. But outside of that, everyone else, all their games were good enough.
Yeah.
Not games that I would buy because the themes were different. There's one that I would have, which was that 4X game we played.
That 4X just gets you every time.
It does. Like, I don't know, 4X, it hooks me.
Yeah, but yeah, they're different.
But everyone was kind.
There's all kinds of levels. Like I say, there was first time designers all the way up to somebody who's gotten 3 or 4 major games already published. So, and that's a change I feel that I think.
And it ran the gamut, didn't it, Rob? Like one game, everything was produced. Now it wasn't art that they were allowed to use. They just stole art from other stuff, right? But it looked like a produced game. And another game, some of the cards were literally a handwritten piece of paper inside of a sleeve.
Oh yeah,
like hey, I changed it to this, and it's handwritten. Yeah. So it kind of ran the gamut on the production value at that time.
I think it's interesting too is Jamie's run this for a number of years now, and I don't think he's really ever signed any of the games from this, right? That I know of. Looking at his games,
he hasn't. So he says, and again, that's something he kind of states pretty openly. He mentions it in the emails and things that he talks about a little bit while we're there. But yeah, he kind of reserves the right that he is kind of looking at all the games, and if something strikes him, that he may try to strike up a conversation with somebody.
Pendulum was one of them.
Yeah, was it? Okay.
Was it?
from
Okay.
what-
Yeah,
Yeah.
Pendulum was one that he saw at Design Day. I can't think of any others. You're right.
Yeah, but he does say that it's more about just giving them an
Just
opportunity to get the game in front of new people, other designers, and I kind of feel I felt a little bit sometimes more so this year than when we went last year that the designers were really helping each other. I don't know how to say this, but. Some very positively. There were a few that I heard kind of almost negatively. Telling people this sucks. This sucks. You need to fix that. You need to do that. But there was one in particular, and you know who it is, Carlos. I'll mention it later. But there was one who I was a little surprised at the way he was kind of getting after some of the games he was playing, and got to play one game with him, and he was pretty critical. But he's a designer as well, and he's designed several games, and so I think he probably is giving them very constructive things. And everybody there knew who he was.
I think is what stood out to me.
Yeah,
it wasn't because Rob and I really kind of were a little recluse.
Yeah,
we kind of like observing a lot of it, but the interactions between because the designers are going around playtesting other designers' games.
Yeah,
bro, they were like blackada.
Yeah, giving it to them.
They were hitting them with
feedback. You need to fix this. You need to do that. There's a website over here you can go that'll teach you how to do that. And so
I was like, I wanted to cry. Like, it's not even my game.
yeah.
It's interesting. I thought it was going to be more than just one day. Like, I know it says Stonemaier Design Day, right? So I probably should have figured that out. But I figured it was like an all weekend event where you're playing. You're spending 2 days or a whole weekend of gaming. It was interesting. It's only just one day. Yeah, that's it. That's interesting.
They cram a lot into the one day, but yeah, it is all day on Saturday. Yep.
Yeah, all foods included. You show up, you stay there the whole day, play games, and Rob and I, as we did, close down the place.
Yep.
But I guess this year was not the same. But we will be back next year when that, Wifey and I are already talking about it. The early 2023, we're going to be getting set and getting booked in for that trip.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, sounds fun.
All right, folks. Well, that's going to wrap up our podcast episode for this week. Don't forget, Your Turn Con coming up in, 1 week? Single tickets showed up, so single day tickets are now up on, and there's also a flea market out there. So we're hoping to see y'all out there November 4th, 5th, and 6th at Your Turn Con. Don't forget our Thursday night call-in show every Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Mr. Oben, thank you for joining us this week. I'm Carlos.
I'm Rob.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Wayne.
And we're the Beans and Dice Podcast, a podcast about how we game. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Beans and Dice podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe.